Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So Jan Hus was influenced by John Wycliffe, who we learned in part one, we'll say, was in England, and he was arguing that Scripture is the sole authority. So that influences Jan Hus in Bohemia, okay, and he was executed in 1414 for heresy. His martyrdom inspired the Hussite movement. This leads to the Reformation. The clear-cut failures of the papacy led to the despicable Reformation, where white supremacists disgraced themselves, adding to the disgrace of the churches. From 1517 to the mid-1600s, there was one of the most transformative periods in Christian history. It marked the fragmentation of Western Christianity and the birth of Protestantism and a reform movement within the Catholic Church. The Reformation began in 1517, when Martin Luther, who I describe as a devil, who was a German Augustinian monk and a theologian, posted his 95 Theses on the church door of Wittenberg. Luther's ideas quickly spread thanks to the printing press, sparking debate and inspiring reform-minded Christians across Europe, where his hypocrisy was illustrated in them as well. Okay, and keep in mind that eventually we'd get the KKK in America. This is 1517. Eventually you get the 1776, right? But before that, in 1619, the first official landing of slaves into the American hemisphere, right? If you want to call it that, into the North and South American area. Okay, in 1619, you have Hispaniola, what have you. Okay, so just a mere 100 years before the slaves start landing in the Americas, right? You have the Reformation. Most people, they don't think of it that way, right? This is during the slave trade, right? The 1500s, the white man goes to Africa, what have you, he starts touching down, says, what do we do here? And they start trading things, what have you, and at some point they start taking slaves. So the Reformation is like this evil slave master movement. And if they didn't have slaves already. I mean, again, Romans had slaves, Greeks had slaves. They had slaves and indentured servants, things like this. You say tomato, I say tomato. They had slaves in some form or fashion, depending on how you use the word. So these are evil slave masters arguing with other evil slave masters over who controls the money and the women. That's the main thing it's about. They like to cite it because, especially in American history, they cite it in terms of, they're selling indulgences and selling church offices. Yes, they were. But the guys arguing with them is like the communists in Russia arguing with the Nazis, right? These were German supremacists. Remember, part of the disagreements between the Eastern and Western churches, right? The Roman Catholic Church in the Western Roman Empire, and the Eastern Orthodox Church, there were cultural disagreements, racial, social orders. They were arguing, hey, I like Germans better. Hey, I like Eastern types better. They're arguing things like this, right? And so the Klan eventually is a continuity of those arguments that started before the Reformation, continued in the Reformation, and were also expressed in the Ku Klux Klan when they didn't like Jews and they didn't like Catholics. Why? Because they were arguing about social order. The Klan was very concerned with social order. And they also were aware that Christianity is rooted in African martial arts monotheism. Okay? So they were like, we don't like black people, Jews, and Catholics. It's that simple. Okay. Again, Hebrew is even an Afro-Asiatic language. Germans turn pale when you bring that up. German racial supremacists in front of their congregation would turn pale if you bring that up. Say, no! Because they don't want to admit that the religion is inherently a martial arts religion, a African monotheistic martial arts religion. Exodus 15:3, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. Hebrew is an Afro-Asiatic language. Amos 9:7, are you not the same as the Cushites unto me, O children of Israel? Okay, the Cushites, not the Japhethites. Not Ashkenaz and Mini and Arat. Not Gomer, but Cush. Ham begot Cush. Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty warrior before the Lord. Even the Bible itself is pointing to an African martial arts order. Okay, Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod, Nimrod founded Babylon. Abraham was from Chaldea, aka Ur, and Ur in Babylon, where he heard the proverbial saying like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And so a lot of racist Jews and whites started saying that Nimrod was magically bad, and they started citing some scriptures that don't prove that. For example, when Jacob changed his name to Israel and started being right with God, okay, he was seen as a good person, as a protagonist. However, the Israelites are seen as doing bad things back to back to back. They're chastised by all their prophets back to back, evil, evil, evil. So the Israelites became known as a wicked people, corrupt from the beginning onward. Look at it. The prophets say it in the Bible, in the Old Testament. So it is with the Cushites. After Nimrod dies, at some point the Cushites start doing bad things. They take part with the Tower of Babel or whatever, right? They do all kinds of bad things, idolatry, and so they become known as evil. They're described the same way as the Israelites, as being wicked from some point early on and on from there. Okay? All right. So where we're here. Okay, so I brought up the KKK. In Switzerland, a gentleman led reforms in Zurich, emphasizing a symbolic interpretation of the Eucharist and the authority of Scripture. Again, I say gentlemen to be polite, but all these guys are bad guys, to make a long story short. Some are bad guys because they don't know better. Some are just greedy. John Calvin, a French theologian based in Geneva, developed a systematic theology that stretched predestination, the sovereignty of God, and a disciplined Christian life. So they believe that things were predetermined. You have a predestination. He believes that God is sovereign, and he wants people to live a disciplined Christian life. However, he too was a white supremacist as far as anyone can tell. Calvinism spread widely, especially in Scotland, the Netherlands, and parts of France. In England, the Reformation took a different path. King Henry VII broke with Rome in 1534 after being denied an annulment by the Pope, right? After being denied the right to marry his own cousin or something like this. I forgot what it's about. It's about marriage, right? So it goes back to that sexual control and whether or not the church validates it, quote unquote, what have you. And that caused the establishment of the Church of England, with the evil monarch as its head. So the head of the Church of England was the monarch, right? Was the king, was the corrupt, white supremacist, greedy, poor person abusing monarch. Okay, so as Protestant movements expanded, the Catholic Church initiated its own reform, the Counter-Reformation. These guys say, hey, we're losing power. So here comes the Counter-Reformation, and they're pissed. And these guys, today, if I'm not mistaken, the Catholics by themselves outnumber all the Protestant groups put together. Okay, there's like 1.3 billion of them. And I think there's maybe 1.2 to 1.5 billion Christians who are Protestants. Okay, so they either outnumber the vast majority of them or they outnumber all of them put together. So the Catholic Reformation was aimed to correct abuses, reaffirm doctrine, and combat the spread of Protestantism. Okay, so you think they were going to combat it by saying, come on guys, please stop, come on guys, cut it out, or were they pissed off, killing people, so on and so forth? Think about it. The pivotal event was the Council of Trent from 1545 to 1563, which clarified Catholic teachings on salvation, the sacraments, the authority of the Church, and the role of tradition. The council also mandated reforms in clergy, liturgical practice, and church discipline. Years of warfare came as a result of the Reformation and the Catholic response. The French Wars of Religion, the 30 Years' War in the Holy Roman Empire, and the English Civil War were very much about politics and national identity, and hardly about theology, other than the fact it was made up to try to elevate scum. So these wars were so-called religious wars to a large degree, but religion, again, was like an excuse for their other concerns. Okay, and they basically all know they're lying about God, especially inside the church, and they're waging wars. Protestantism took root in Northern Europe, while Catholicism remained dominant in the South. Okay, that's key there, right? If these things are true, how come it's whoever's throwing their weight around, they're like, we believe you, right? They're like, we're in the North, we believe that. We're in the South, we believe that. Okay, so, the Italians, the Spanish, right? The Catholic people in the South, right? Now, there's Catholics in Ireland to a large degree, and there's Catholics in Northern Europe, but the dominant kind of groupings were the Protestant groupings, as they basically still are. Unless I'm missing something here. Okay. Protestantism took root in Northern Europe. Okay, I went over that. Christianity was a divided Judas faith, while new evil theological traditions and evil institutional structures were emerging. This era is said to usher in modern denominational, aka denominational Christianity, and to have helped shaped. So I guess it's modern denominational Christianity, aka denominational Christianity, and to have helped shape the relationship between shallow and empty faith and power. Okay, so they said something to the effect of, it shaped the relationship between faith and power. No. It's shallow and empty faith. Look at the timeline. These people never want to admit the timeline. They never want to put things into context. Put Christianity and your religion into context and stop beating around the bush. Stop trying to save your own skin or save your job and tell the truth about God. The history of Christianity is like the history of the Native American genocide or something. It is very evil. There's a bunch of rape. It is very evil. However, does that mean that you shouldn't think about what it means to do unto others as you would have them do unto you if you were righteous? You should think about it. Does that mean you shouldn't love God with all your heart? You should love God with all your heart and all your being. So there's all kinds of truths. Does that mean that those who pursue ill-gotten gains don't end up with a mouthful of gravel, don't end up in hell, don't end up having wasted their life as some kind of greedy, narcissistic dog? It does mean that. So the bottom line is, if it's true and it's in the Bible, then it's true. If it's true and it's not in the Bible, it's still true. But you shouldn't think that Wycliffe was right or the Pope was magically right. They were wrong. Scripture is not the sole authority, and the Catholic Church is not the sole authority. I am the last sole authority in the flesh. I'm the top martial artist ever, the one the Christ in the Bible's returning at the end is superimposed on. I am the Son of God in reality. Okay? They won't even debate me publicly because they know I'm right. Even if we left the timeline of Christianity out of the debate, it would still be painfully obvious that I'm right. That's how clear-cut it is. Okay, so confessionalism. From the mid-16th century to the early 18th century, we saw a lot more evil nonsense. Now keep in mind, this is leading up to the founding of America. Okay, we'll get into the Enlightenment and how it went into the founding of America and the kind of Christian denominations we have here, which should make it open and shut that your Christian denomination is wrong. You should already know that by now, but we'll get to that. I think we'll get to that we'll start part 3 with the Enlightenment. We'll make part 3 about the Enlightenment and what is going on right now, and we'll try to keep it brief here. So again, confessionalism. This is very key. Write down confessionalism. This is very key. From the mid-16th century to the early 18th century, there was a lot of more evil going on. There was state-supported confessions. State-supported confessions. They went around saying, look, enough is enough. What do you believe? You say, look, I don't think you're right. Then they persecuted you. The Peace of Augsburg in 1550 laid the foundation for this era within the Holy Roman Empire. It introduced the principle that the religion of the ruler determined the religion of the territory in a new way. While initially applied only to Catholicism and Lutheranism, this principle cemented the idea of, basically forced religious conformity. As a result, rulers across Europe began actively promoting a specific confession as central to political loyalty and social order. So again, I know I'm being stumbled here because the churches are mad, the atheists are mad, everyone their mom's mad because they like to push certain narratives and play a game within certain boundaries and then split the pie. They are still scum, I assure you. Okay. So again, they wanted people to live life in a way that reflected that the religion of the ruler determined the religion of the territory. Instead of saying, hey, you can have freedom of religion, they say, this leads to the Enlightenment, mind you. They say, you better have our religion. Okay, America's not supposed to have confessionalism. We basically have it right now. We're living in a new era of confessionalism. It's neo-confessionalism, if you think about it. Okay, that's why there's council culture. That's why people are persecuted, the gang stalking, the mobbing, the workplace bullying. I can go on and on and on. Okay, but it's not limited to Christian factions. There's satanic confessionalism going on, atheistic confessionalism. There's progressive confessionalism, MAGA confessionalism. We live in an era of neo-confessionalism where people have to think a certain way and publicly say things a certain way or they're persecuted. And by publicly, it doesn't mean, just on social media. That means when you go to work, when someone asks you a question, what have you. Okay. While initially applied only to Catholicism and Lutheranism, this principle cemented the idea of forced religious conformity. As a result, rulers across Europe began actively promoting a specific confession as central to political loyalty and social order, and social order, and social order. Those who overlook the social order argument and they don't understand Proverbs 16:12, it says the throne is established in righteousness, not political clout, in righteousness, not financial terrorism, not repression and political oppression. It's established in righteousness. And you're all following the crowd like scared sheeple, afraid to face people who are pushing confessionalism and neo-confessionalism under the guise of constitutional justice and freedom. What they are doing and what they did is clearly demonic. Okay. Schools were involved. Coercive practices were common. They corrupted an already corrupt religion even more and paved the way for the modern mass murder and mass rape that we see still going on today. Rape in various forms, rape by deception, rape by force, unprocessed rape kits, while they're giving the rich tax cuts. Just a sick society. Forced marriages still go on. The churches are instrumental in America, in California, hell, in this very city I'm in, people are coerced into marrying people. It is very sick what's going on. Not everything that's going on is in the news. I've done lots of research. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence that I'm right. Look up sextortion. It's not limited to just pictures. Okay, far more evil goes on than you think. And the recent legislation they passed doesn't cover it. Okay, it's a long story why that is. Anyway. So secular rulers made sure that marriages were as disgraceful as their cultures, while public behavior was hypocrisy at its worst. This is said to have influenced the development of European cultures. Okay, so where do European cultures come from? Oh boy, they come from Roman evil. They come from the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation, confessionalism. If you have any questions, put in the comments. They come from all these despicable eras where they're lying about God and they're pushing people around and they're forcing people to marry and they're raping and they're taking slaves and indentured servants, which are basically slaves, and they're just abusing everyone. And that leads up to the Enlightenment. See part 3. Thank you.